My name's Ari, and in this video I'll be reviewing the MOZA AirCross 2. I've been using this gimbal for a while now, and I have some thoughts on it. Here's a brief review of the MOZA AirCross 2. Here's a quick glimpse of the product box, which is pretty big by itself. Inside is a carrying case for the gimbal. My first impression of this case was that it felt like it was made of hard styrofoam. I've seen other carrying cases with hard shells that look nicer than this, but this case was tough and sturdy nonetheless. Now to open the case, 2 flaps on the top and everything is inside. A manual, a quick release plate, a small case for cables to connect your camera to the gimbal, as well as the charging cable. I use a Sony, but there's a cable for every camera the gimbal supports. Moving on, an L bracket. The L bracket makes the gimbal very unique from other gimbals as it holds the camera from its side. A mini tripod which is collapsible. And finally the MOZA AirCross 2 gimbal itself. It isn't too heavy, weighing about 2 pounds and easy to carry with one hand. That's all we're going to need for now. The camera I'll be using is a Sony a6000 with an 85mm Zeiss lens. This isn't the normal camera and lens I would use, as I'm using my main camera, the Sony a7 Mark III with the G Master 2470 to record this video. The Sony a6000 is pretty light, which will be easier on the gimbal. Lens cap off, flip the camera upside down, and screw the L bracket onto the bottom. You will need a coin to secure the bracket. Next is the mini tripod into the gimbal, which can be easily fastened or taken off. The mini tripod is really sturdy and can hold the gimbal and a heavy camera on a flat surface. I noticed these tiny switches on the gimbal that act as locks when storing the device away. You can lock the arms so that they don't move around or swing freely and damage the gimbal or other gear. As I said earlier, the camera and the L bracket will be held on the side, rather than most gimbals that sit on a quick release plate. It's nothing like I've ever seen before, as it allows for landscape or even portrait videos. Now it's time for setup. I've heard that setting up a camera on the MOZA takes longer than other gimbals, and I can see why that may be since the L bracket makes a difference. The camera should balance on all 3 axes, the tilt, roll, and the pan. When that is done, connect the cable that supports your camera with the gimbal. This will allow you to charge the camera from the gimbal while using it, as well as trigger recordings or change basic camera settings. To power the gimbal, it's a press and hold of the power button on the focus ring, which will also display a glowing LED ring around it. The glow does look cool, but may also serve as a distraction when recording videos in public. I've recorded with guitars and the light would reflect off the surface of the guitar. Next is auto-tuning the gimbal. This will check and automatically tune the axes of the gimbal to the weight of your camera. The gimbal will return you numbers indicating the ideal power levels for each axis. Now it can be ready to use. You can control the tilt and the pan with the joystick. Recentering the gimbal requires only 2 taps of the trigger. Holding the trigger will allow you to lock all the axes for different shots, or you can individually lock the tilt, roll, or pan while you can manually control the other axes. There is also an FPV and sports mode built in. My favorite function here is something called Inception mode or the barrel roll. The gimbal will point the camera away from the gimbal and rotate so that you can get very creative with shots. This will require that your camera is perfectly calibrated with the gimbal so that shots aren't uneven or the gimbal stops midway due to imbalances. You can have lots of fun with Inception mode shooting forward or upwards. With the gimbal is the MOZA Master app. To set this up, you will need to connect the gimbal to your phone's Bluetooth. Here you can see the gimbal's battery level and choose to put the gimbal to sleep or power it on. The remote control allows you to remotely control the gimbal's tilt, roll, and pan. Another favorite function for me here has to be the mimic motion control mode, where the gimbal will follow wherever your phone faces. Here you can change sensitivity as well as which axis you want free or locked. You can always hit cancel to get out of it. The battery here is very unique. Push down to snap it out and the battery will indicate its power with LEDs. You can charge the battery directly with the cable or while the battery is still in the gimbal, which makes for really easy use. One battery will last you about 6 to 8 hours depending on the power level you're using. And that's it for my brief review of the MOZA AirCross 2. Overall, I must say it is a very compact and light gimbal that can surprisingly carry pretty heavy cameras like my Sony a7 Mark III. Its size also makes it ideal for storage and travel with just about any mirrorless or lighter DSLR. You really can't go wrong with this gimbal, and it's helped me with videography more than I could ever ask for. I do see myself bringing this gimbal for travel over other heavier gimbals I'd rather use at home. Also a quick shout out to my friend George who accompanied me on some of my shoots and to also get shots of me recording. I'll leave a link to the MOZA AirCross 2 in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. Thank you.